I'm Bob Van Antwerp, going to be doing the moderating, and I have very capable assistants and two people with me here. I have the capable assistance of Johnny LeClair from Riverton, Wyoming, who needs no introduction, but let's give him a hand anyway, Johnny LeClair. And this young fella here is a lot younger than Johnny and I happen to be, is Ted Nation from the San Diego area. Nice hand for Ted. I'd like to preface this session by saying that the need in today's square dance teaching field is great for taking time to evaluate ourselves before ever taking on the responsibility of teaching. In today's square dance teaching, the importance of really being prepared is greater than ever due to the command and the amount of dance movements to be taught, the styling that is ever so important, and the emphasis that needs to be placed on holding the dancers, the proper techniques in teaching that needs to be applied, and above that, the ability of the instructor to evaluate himself so he'll be sure he is ready. That is what the session is all about today. Like I said, I have very capable assistants, and the two people that I've just mentioned to you. Ted is going to be giving you his talk on preparing yourself to teach and what qualifications you feel you must have to be effective. Johnny will follow him with a review of the basics as it pertains to one's own qualifications. I will endeavor to wrap up the presentation session with some questions where we can all participate. And to me, this session is as important a session that we have here at this convention. Too many times, it is common practice for the novice teacher to dance a short time, then set up shop for a beginner's class, actually without properly being prepared, jumping into a teaching situation where he or she happens not to be prepared. Then our poor students suffer due to his or her inability to teach, or who has not properly evaluated how effective he or she may be in their teaching realm. Therefore, the dropouts occur, never to return due to the poor and ineffective teaching offered by the self-appointed leader instructor. It has been stated before, and I truly believe this, that there is no other activity that can match ours as far as square dance leaders, instructors, for the speed from which the novice advances from the beginner to a teacher, to an expert, to a professional teacher, and an authority. After Ted and Johnny's presentation, and time permitting, as stated before, I'll be asking some questions of you, and I'd like to hear some from you people. And then if we still have time, we're going to have some role-playing. We're going to put you in some situations, depending on the time frame that we have. So now I'd like to, without any further ado, I'd like to call on our first presenter, and that would be Ted Nation. And Ted, it is all yours.
Thank you, Bob. As Bob has already said, this intercession is dedicated to the topic of self-evaluation as it pertains to teaching a square dance class or preparing to teach a square dance class. When we accept this assignment, we have to do lots of things. And one of the things that we're talking about today is judging yourself, and that's not easy to do, but you have to judge yourself to see if you really are qualified. Now, obviously, before you can be an effective instructor in anything, you have to know the subject matter. We would not appreciate having someone teach people to drive that had not first mastered the art of driving a car. And so that brings up an analogy. Should it be any different in square dancing? And the answer is no. If you do not have a firm grasp on the choreography that you are going to be expected to teach, then you really should not be teaching that choreography. That's an obvious, or should be an obvious requirement, and because it is obvious, I don't plan to spend a whole lot of time talking about that. What I would like to do is to take this self-evaluation process a little bit farther than I've ever heard it taken before and get down to some very, very basic questions. We're going to talk about lesson plans. We're going to talk about, probably one of us will talk about styling. We'll probably talk about timing and things like that. These are all important. They're vital. But they come later. The thing that you have to do, in my opinion, when you decide to teach square dancing is you have to ask yourself a question. And that question is, do I want to teach square dancing? Or perhaps, do I want to teach this square dance class? Now that sounds like kind of a flaky thing to ask a bunch of callers that are here learning how to be effective as square dance instructors. But think about the implication of that question for just a moment. If you, in your mind, are not prepared to teach a square dance class because you would really rather not, how effective can you be? And that's a question that we all have to ask. It's vital, tremendously vital. The outcome of so much in life is determined by our outlook on everything, or our attitude, that it should come as no small surprise to you that the output or your effectiveness in teaching a class is no less determined by your attitude. We accept in square dancing a great many things as just a matter of course. One of the procedures that we accept as a matter of course is that all callers are teachers. All callers teach square dance classes. A lot of you didn't think about that. You just decided that you wanted to be a caller, and all you had in your mind was calling to 20 squares of good dancers, and it didn't occur to you until you bought your first set that you didn't have anyone to call to, and if you wanted to have someone to call to, you were going to have to teach them. I'm not entirely sure that this is the way we should go about that, and if someone is not interested in teaching, I'm not entirely sure that he should be teaching. Now you ask yourself the basic question, do I want to teach square dancing? And if you answer no, I really don't want to teach a class this year, then you should not teach a class that year, because you will not be able to get your attitude working for you. You will not get your frame of mind going to help you teach the class. If you've answered yes to that question, if you've given yourself a nice, honest yes, I do want to teach this class, I do want to be effective, you've already gone a long ways towards being an effective caller. We have a good many tools available to us in the realm of teaching square dancers, or teaching people to square dance. The CALLERLAB program list is one of those tools that we have. That's sort of a roadmap, gets you where you're headed, lets you know all the stops in between here and there, wherever there is. And that's determined by the level of the club that you're teaching the class for. If you've answered no to the question, you will be hurrying to get to the good stuff. And it's all good stuff. It's all good stuff if your attitude is in the right place. Now, generally speaking, and it is a generality, the callers that want to be teachers, the callers that want to be effective, generally have dancers dancing with them or for them that are good dancers. Now, you don't have to take my word for that. When you get home, check it out. You can find that very easily. The callers that are interested in their dancers, interested in their success, are the successful teachers. They've got their attitude working for them, and they are more interested in helping those people attain the goal of square dancer than they are anything else, and they do a good job of it. The people that, as I said before, that are not really all that interested in teaching rush through the early stages to get to the good stuff. We've already talked briefly about the CALLERLAB program lists. And as I have said, those are your goal, or that is where you're headed. Some of you have in front of you a couple handouts that I've prepared. A couple things I want you to notice about those handouts are, first off, they're not typed. I've done that on purpose. A good many of you don't know how to type, and I don't really see any reason for writing lesson plans that you need to learn how to type. They're written, and all I have done is just decided where I'm going to go with the next class. So let me get one of those copies. The page that has a 2 on the top encircled, that was going to be page 2 of 3 handouts. The first page was a CALLERLAB program list. I didn't bring one of those because they're all over everywhere, and I have assumed that you have probably picked one up by now. The first tip there says 2 couples square review. This is going to give me an opportunity to jump back into attitude once again. If you're really sincerely interested in teaching people to square dance, one of the things that you will always be doing is you will always be on the lookout for a better way to skin that same cat. You will always be looking for another window in to the world of square dancing. Now, I'm not going to say that the 2 couple square idea is the greatest thing in the world, but for me, it is. And so I use it every class night. The very first tip is a tip with 2 couple squares. When you break down your maneuvers on the CALLERLAB program list, you will see that over 80% of those maneuvers are done by 4 people. So the question arises, do we really need to complicate the thing by throwing in 4 more extra people? And I have come to the determination that no, you really don't need to do that. I wish that I could say that the 2 couple square idea was my idea, because personally I think it's the greatest thing since sliced bread. However, I stole the idea from Bill Peters, or Bill Davis. I don't know where Bill Davis got the idea, but it's a good idea. And the attitudinal thing that I want to point out here is that if you've got your things together, you want to become a good square dance teacher, you look at this as, I wonder if this idea has any merit. And you may take it home, and you may look at it, and determine for yourself it does or it does not. If you're talking about that basic question again, do I want to teach square dancing? If you have really answered to yourself no, you will dismiss this idea, but not only this idea, anything else new that comes along as something you don't need, without doing the necessary choreographic homework to check it out to make sure that it is something that you can or cannot use. Going to deviate just a little bit and dive into some of the possibilities on the 2 couple square. You'll notice that I've got box circulate in there, wheel and deal, box the net and pass the ocean. Those are the things that I say I'm going to really cover those in this tip. A lot of other things get covered, but those are the things I'm going to spotlight that tip. You'll see that the teach is a clover leaf. Now here comes the interesting thing about 2 couple squares. Although it takes only 4 people to do almost all of the square dance choreography, it takes a lot of homework on the part of a caller to do some of these things. Now, to do a cloverleaf or to teach a cloverleaf, you could get there a lot of ways. You could have a couple with your back to you, couple number 1, do a California twirl. You'd be set up to do a cloverleaf. However, that would not cover what I had in mind for that tip. I wanted to go into wheel and deals. So a good way to do that would be to review circle to a line. You're going to have to tell them who's going to break and make a line, but you could have them circle up 4 number 3 couple, break and make a line facing the back of the hall. Practice a wheel and deal, that puts them all facing you. Then you could ask them or instruct them, since they're all facing you at this time, to do the cloverleaf. Once you've done that, you could have them do a star through and step ahead, and the next people star through. You're all set up to do another cloverleaf. That example should be enough to let you know that you could go on and on and on and on. But there again, we have to get back to the attitude, not of the dancer or of CALLERLAB itself, but of the individual members that make up CALLERLAB. Do you want to be an effective caller? If you do, you'll examine the idea. If you really don't, you've already dismissed it. So the gist of what we're talking about, or what I'm talking about, is directed to those callers that really do have the need to be effective. Now, I want to show you this lesson plan in a little bit more detail, because a lot of people are very, very nervous about preparing lesson plans because they don't really know what goes into it. They feel like it's something very deep, dark, and mysterious, and there's really no problem at all to a lesson plan. Let me show you what I've done. You can choose to follow my example or not, but it will perhaps get you thinking. That first page is the page before I go to the dance. That's where I'm headed. That's my ideas, what I'm going to do. The second page is after the dance is over. As the dance goes on, I keep track of myself. On page 2 there, you'll see that box circulate's got a check by it. I did some box circulate that tip. Wheel and deal, box the net, I got 2. Pass the ocean has a circle around it. It means I didn't get 2 at that tip, but the check mark tells me I really did cover it because the next tip I picked it up. And it goes right on down the line like that. You can see the ones I've circled. I didn't get them that tip. I got them the next tip. Then I can take that lesson plan at not the end of the evening, but the next day, take that lesson plan along with my CALLERLAB program list, and I can start checking things off that I've covered on the CALLERLAB program list. I keep one of those for each class, and when I feel that that class knows how to do a right and left through, I take a yellow highlight marker and I mark through, right and left through. They know how to do that. I don't have to worry about it anymore. If there's something highlighted, they know it. If it isn't highlighted, I'm still in the process of reviewing that. Keep one of those for each class, because I can't, in my mind, I have not been able to keep 2 classes straight, especially if they started at the same time. It's very difficult for me, but I can write a lesson plan very quickly and get myself where I'm headed. Also, I want you to notice that I only plan to review 4 things in each tip, 4 specific things. And I find that if I try to cover too much in one tip, I keep them up for 20, 30 minutes, and that's way too long. Try to keep the tips very short, cover 4 things, teach something. Also, something on there on the first tip that may be a little bit foreign to some of you, and I feel I should explain it so it doesn't get you confused, is the cowboy polka. Now, that doesn't really have a whole lot to do with square dancing. It has a lot to do with people, though. In the locality where I'm calling, there are a lot of Western bars, and people go out and they do the cowboy dancing. They enjoy the cowboy dancing. A lot of my members of both clubs enjoy cowboy dancing. So it's my job as an instructor, as a square dance caller, to provide that for them as well, and I do that. Besides that, the clubs dance it, so it's got to be taught in the class so that the class members fit in. Back to the attitude again, and I keep coming back to that, and there's a reason that I keep coming back to that, is because if your attitude is working for you, for square dancing, for the activity, most of these things, whether you write them down or not, you're already doing. If you would really rather not teach square dancing, you probably aren't doing them. It's very important that before you attempt to do anything, that thing that you are going to do is something that you want to do. One last point on the lesson plans, and then I will get off of that, is that writing lesson plans for the first 3 weeks is a good idea. A lot of people do that. I cannot fault them for that. I don't do it, though. I use the CALLERLAB program list for that. Before we got the CALLERLAB program list, I programmed everything because you had to have some way of knowing where you're going. But now CALLERLAB provides me with my lesson plan for the first 3 weeks. Just keep track of what I've done because I have to repeat a lot, and then I take off from there. So my parting shot will be to dig inside yourself. It's a little late for this season, but we've got some September and October coming up when classes start again. Think about it. Do you want to teach square dancing? If you do not, the thing I should put to you is, are you doing yourself or the activity any favor in doing something you would rather not? Give yourself a break, give the dancers a break, get your attitude working for you, and answer the question properly. Yes, I do want to teach square dancing. Thank you.
Thank you, Ted. Since we do not have microphones out here, which you could speak from, we may have some difficulty on this. But I'd like to have you respond, and then if you have a question, well, I'll repeat the question for the tape benefit, and then we can get the response from that. A few things which, before I have Johnny come up, I'd like to bring to mind. And think in your own mind is, what does your wife or your partner play in the preparation of your square dance class? It's very important. I would like to have anybody comment, any of the ladies who are wives or the husbands of lady callers. Do you have any response of what your responsibilities happen to be before you start your class? Does anybody like to respond to this? Thank you. Let me respond this way. I think the partner is so ever important. Yes. Good. Would you stand up, and Leah Irvine? I'm going to repeat what you say over the microphone for the tape. Leah Irvine from Mesa, Arizona is saying first. Friendly with the people, all right. All right, that they are wanted, okay? Anybody else want to respond? All right, let me move on. Yes. All right, for the purpose of the tape, I'm responding to the tape as well as saying here that it's the opportunity presents itself for the wife or the husband of the said caller is to get them mingling among the other people, right? All right, okay, thank you. Now let me ask him a few other questions of you. Yes?
One other thing before we
all right.
Sometimes the club doesn't take leadership in this, so it falls back on the caller's wife to make sure that the present social atmosphere is going to be a success, as well as this.
Making sure the social atmosphere is present, and the wife is part of that. Fine, fine. It's kind of difficult to do when you don't have the microphone up and I'm having to repeat all this. Anybody else? We're going to move. You all right? Please.
The wife can very well see when there is someone upset on the floor and find out why and help smooth it over.
She goes into the squares with the people on the floor, and if there's some problems, she's trying to smooth the problems over. Fine. Recognize the problems. Thank you. Yes, Scott?
I think primarily in my mind, the wife's an extra set of eyes for the caller. She sees things that the caller may not be able to see on the stage.
She has the eyes in the back of the head of the caller who's up there, really. She's being able to observe. Very good. All right. Now, I don't want to take too long a time on each one here. Let me ask you individually, how do you personally evaluate yourself that you are ready before that class takes full? For example, if I have a class of 1 square, if I have 50 squares, in your own self-evaluation, what makes you really feel that you are ready to teach that class? Give me 1 or 2 things. Attitude. Good. Confidence. Good. Preparation. Good. I think that an old saying that I can remember back from Ed Gilmore. One night, Ed, before his passing, we stayed in a motel room, and all night he talked to me, and I slept a while, and he'd still be talking. That was Ed. Ed said there's 2 requirements of a good instructor in square dancing. Number 1 is to know your material and know it well, and the second thing is have the patience of a saint. And that stuck with me. Those are 2 important factors. Another one, on self-evaluation, are you ready? Experience, all right.
I feel you should basically enjoy what you're doing.
Enjoy what you're doing, fine. Anybody else? Devotion, amen. Devotion. What? Commitment, all right. What about honesty? Honesty to your dancers. Frankness.
Honesty to yourself.
Honesty to yourself, right. I think and let's not forget one thing, and I'm going to get off this for just a minute. Let's consider the fact that as callers, we learn about timing, we learn about phrasing, we learn about choreography, we learn about presentation of material, we learn about diction, enunciation, and etc. But when you really come down to it, all these ingredients are wrapped up into one ball, and what makes this ball tick? It's one word, leadership. And I feel in today's square dancing, we are in need of great strides in our leadership. I think sometimes we have slipped in our leadership to our people. I think because we see somebody else do something here, we try to follow that track whether it's right or wrong. And this is wrong. I think we have to do it on our own, and we have to develop our leadership traits that I know we have. One more question, then I'm going to have Johnny up here. Could I ask any of you, what do you offer in handouts prior to your class? Do you give them any material as they walk in the door? Anybody? What do you give? All right, CALLERLAB list.
I set up a program which lasts a year long for my dancers. I hand them out this handwritten sheet of what we will do each night.
For the tape recording, I'm saying that Scott Byers is indicating that he hands out a format which lasts the whole session, right? All right. What does this say on this, Scott? And what do you tell on this, Scott?
I tell them exactly when there will be a review night, when exactly the basic will be taught.
All right.
Taught everything.
All right. When a basic will be taught and when the review be. All right. Another one. Yes. Do's and don'ts. Good. Now, what do you mean by do's and don'ts? I know, but I want you to tell them. Stand up, please.
Proper dress, bathing, being presentable,
All right.
good attitude,
Good.
hobby, and we're just for fun.
All right. Code of ethics. All right. In other words, you're talking about the deodorant. You're talking about the non-drinking. You're telling the ladies that for their benefit, maybe low-heel shoes, full skirts, or a skirt. Now, maybe I'm a little bit strict, but my dancers on the first night are told that they will not come in slacks or pantsuits, and men will not wear hats. I also, in my first night, because I've had people come to my first class in high-heel shoes, and slacks. But if we're going to keep the qualifying features in this movement and the dress that is so appropriate to me in the square dance attire, I think we have to start working on this from the first night, because I am appalled personally at some of the dances I have been to, and I have seen what some of the people are wearing. And I am maybe from the old-fashioned school, but if you can tell the individual to start off with the first night, you're going to save yourself a lot of problems later on down the road. Anything else on this particular one? Johnny?
One thing I want to mention, I work in a retirement area, and we really have to take a leadership role in everything we do, and we learn from past experiences, and we find out that we get a lot of complaints. It would be for the non-use of deodorant. One that we get is bad breath. So we take this into consideration, and in every class we have mints. So this solves a twofold purpose.
Good point.
Of stimulating that and also quick energy.
You have a selection of mints or chewing gum or something there for?
Not gum.
Not gum, mints. Just for the participants to partake. All right, back here.
Bob, with one of your statements there a minute ago, I have a real difficulty in that the dress code part that you're talking about. When we start establishing that, and then very shortly, not too many months later, we send them to dances, and we have callers that don't adhere to the dress code. And I have a little bit of problem right there.
Well, I'll tell you where. I think here's where the leadership of the individual comes into play. And I'm not afraid to stand before an individual caller, and if he is dressed improperly, I'm not afraid to stand up and say, I think you are dressed improperly. And I think we have to take these stands. If we don't do it, it's going to continue to go on down. After all, you people here are the leaders in your actual dance activity. And if you don't have the guts and the self-determination to stand before people and tell them when you know they're wrong, I think you need some help yourself. Yes.
I have to say that I disagree.
Fine.
When I took my square dancing lessons, I was right out of college, and I came out, and I loved to wear my blue jeans. I had longer hair than I have now, a longer beard. But I liked the square dancing. And the only reason that I stuck with square dancing was because I enjoyed dancing. I enjoyed the physical movements of the dance, and I enjoyed dancing to the music. And I found that a great deal of my friends gave up square dancing because they found it closed-mind in terms of what they wanted to wear. Although they were quite willing to dance, to be excellent dancers, and be friendly, they didn't want to have to dress like everybody.
Let me preface my remarks to offset this to a certain degree. I'm not saying it's the quality. I'm not saying it's the expensiveness. I'm not saying that the blue jeans is not incorrect. I'm saying that whenever you have ladies who come to a square dance in pantsuits, or if you have men who are dancing with hats on, I'm not saying that just plain low-heel shoes. Nothing of that effect. No. Let me clarify that. I'm not saying it's expensive, but I mean we still have to have the feeling of the square dance movement and the looks that it goes with it, is what I'm saying.
Go back to that. I found friends, my wife did not like to wear square dancing. I told her when we started dancing, I said if I pitch wearing that in public, I'll be embarrassed to run away. But we kept with it. Now I get mad at my wife if she doesn't wear the square dancing dress. But at the time, I felt like, as a beginner, I did not feel an open-mindedness. And the longer I stayed, the more I felt that this was appropriate and enjoyed it. But I could have very well been driven away at that time.
I thank you for your comments. We appreciate these. Now we're going to move on. There's some chairs up here. There's 2 seats up here. Why don't you people come fill in so you won't have to stand. Oh, I'm sorry. I missed you. Sets and order indoctrination book. All right. Yes, we're trying to get everything repeated on the tape. All right, now yes, okay.
I don't know about this dress code and stuff. I find out that maybe I'm wrong, but if you let them go on by the time and the people that the angels you have are wearing square dance clothes by the halfway dance or your class is dressed square dance too.
This is probably true. Well, let me repeat what I'm saying once again. I'm saying on the first night, you should give them the feeling, not of a dress code, don't get me wrong. I'm trying to say that you should show them that it is better if they're dressed in a certain condition, maybe because the ladies maybe have not had square dancing. They don't know what the swing is going to do, a buzz step, or things of this nature, and that the low-heel shoes are going to be beneficial to them. And especially in the men's part, we always ask, because we don't like a clammy arm, we like the long sleeve shirts, These are things I'm referring to. Not stipulation, you got to have this, this, this. That's what I'm trying to say. Yes?
Bob, I get to have to speak up on my first 3 nights. I don't really make too much stipulation about what the people do. But I advise them at the time the class goes that the boys will be expected to have long sleeve shirts, girls will be expected to wear comfortable shoes, no open back stuff.
Yes.
And then our next thing that we do.
For the tape, I'm saying that John Head is stipulating that he lets it go for the first 3 nights. This for the tape. All right.
And then once the class begins, then our next goal, you could say, would be towards the halfway dance. I advise the people that if they're going to do a dance, they need to have this.
Need them have them for the halfway dances.
And they all do it.
All right. I wish we had a microphone out for everybody here. It's difficult.
Yeah, Bob, a lot of times the attitude is of the dance club that you're calling for. If the leaders of the club are not adhering to the rules, then it's hard to get your class to adhere to the rules. And the club is adhering to the rules much easier because then they feel like you have to.
Let me ask you, who's the leader?
Well, I'm saying the callers are leaders, but if you're hired to call their dance,
Well, are you a regular caller for them? Are you their regular caller? Don't you have any type of influence over your club?
but the final decision, the bottom line is this. You know.
All right.
Well, I go along primarily with the idea of the first 3 nights having it open, like you said, by halfway point, our club going to the Square Dance Fire. But before the halfway dance, we have a style show.
Good.
The peer pressure takes care of the problem.
Okay, wait a minute. All right, for the benefit of the tape, the first 3 nights, flexible. And by the halfway dance, you indicate you do have a regular dance dress code that you ask them to participate in. So,
We actually, after the 3rd dance, come in dressed,
after the 3rd dance.
but not Square Dance attire to set.
Understand. And then you have a style show. Good point. Yes.
I have found that any time I get up and tell anybody that they have to do this or that they hold their back and they're not going to do it.
It's depend on the way you tell them.
But I have found that the subtle approach works wonders. In the years that I have been dancing, one of the things that amazes me is after a dance, when we go coffee, there are very few places that we ever go that I don't have every lady's head turn and watch my wife as we walk through. They all know that we are square dancers by the way we dress.
Mm-hmm.
But if I was to get up and tell my group of dancers that they had to dress like my wife, they would object.
Let's don't get off the beaten path on this now. And I'm not going to take any more time on the dress stipulation because we have other things to get into. What I'm trying to say is that basically, as leaders of the group that you are leading, you are under a certain type of obligation, I would think, to yourself and to your wife and to the other people to explain these things. And how you approach them with these things, it makes the difference. I would never walk out and say, Madam, you are going to have to wear a this or this or this next week you come. No way. I would lose people. I think it's the approach that you make to them. But you have to show them the reasons why behind it, which it will assist. I'm going to.
You think you would be more comfortable in?
Yeah. Don't you think you would look maybe nicer, or wouldn't you be more comfortable if you had low-heel shoes on? We're going to turn to Johnny LeClair here. Yes, Ted.
He's already practicing a very sound rule of leadership, and a very effective way to lead is by example.
Right. By example. Great. Great. All right. Now we're going to Johnny. Then we're coming back to you. Johnny is going to talk on the review of the basics as it pertains to one's own qualifications. I know of no other person who has had so much success in the field of square dancing as Johnny has. I would say he works about as hard and as many afternoons and many nights as anybody I know in the square dance world. And it's my pleasure to have you listen to Johnny LeClair. Johnny?
First of all, before we start, I'd just like to talk just briefly on something that's been said before, and this is a dress code. As square dancing is involved and continues to change, I work in an area where a lot of the change in square dancing has occurred in a retirement area, and when we get back to the dress code, we have people who are involved in many, many activities within 1 day's time. Square dancing or round dancing may be just part of that overall activity. So the problem arises that it's nearly impossible for them to come in what I consider a dress code during what we call the workshop or the classes. So this is, I've always been a firm believer and still am of a dress code, but we have to be able to be flexible and bend in some of the things that we do. We let them come to the classes and the workshops in whatever's comfortable as long as it's within reason. If it was not in reason, then we would speak to them personally, not publicly. And but at every night function, every party dance, then we say that you have to conform to the dress code. Just thought I'd put that in, Robert, just in case someone would ask. I think we're going to have some overlapping naturally, and when we get down to the list itself, I didn't do much work along that line because I have certain reasons why I did not. I think self-evaluation as preparing yourself for teaching is certainly a very important part of one's overall preparedness to do the best possible job that you can in teaching, or calling as you may prefer. And when we define calling, I think we really have to decide overall what is calling. And I would be one to say that it would be teaching. Probably 90% of whatever you do is really teaching. You may call it calling or whatever you want to call it, but it is actually teaching. So we're going to have to look at the word teaching and decide what it is before we can actually prepare ourselves to be able to evaluate ourselves. There are some, I have written down a number, I didn't have any handouts, but I have written down a number of things that I think are general principles of an effective teacher. In other words, we have to be able to decide what really teaching is before we are able to actually evaluate what type of a job we're going to do. First of all, we're going to decide what are the most important segments or parts of teaching. It's the dancers, in our particular case, and the activity itself. How well can you talk and work with people? What are some of the most important ingredients of teaching? Concise explanation of things, what is to be taught, and how. Then we're going to have to decide, along with the teaching, what are the most important aspects of learning. By doing, by walkthroughs, by seeing. We have to decide what we are going to say by the use of key words, by the use such as men, ladies, forward, back, left, right. In other words, we don't get up before a group of people without preparing ourselves, so we have to go through this mentally as how we are going to explain things. And this is all teaching. I've also written down on another page here that I have, I'll go through a little bit later, the general principles that I feel are in learning. To be able to really evaluate yourself, you have to be honest. in particular to yourself. I think it would be wise and very productive if you would run a tape recorder on your lessons. Take them home, sit down with you and your partner, and go over them and actually grade yourself. Because it doesn't take long to find in what areas you excel and in what areas you can improve on. And we can all do this. I've been in the teaching and calling square dancing for over 30 years, and I never teach a class without type of a ball game when I come to this particular part of teaching. So I must go over it mentally and be prepared. Individuals learn at widely different rates. This is why I think you have to be very, very flexible. I heard one gentleman say that he made out a list for the entire year. And not that that may work for you, but for me it would never work. I have to be flexible. In other words, it's just like taking 4 individuals and those 4 individuals learning something. Every class is an individual within itself, although it has many, many people within that class. It's an individual. One group may learn quicker than another group. So it's an individual, but it's comprised of many, many people within that group. I think this is a known fact, and I can't remember who quoted it, somebody important, and why I didn't get the name, I don't know. It has been said that one can absorb 10% of what one hears and 80% of what one does. So what does this tell us? That we have to let the people do it. In other words, the walkthroughs. How do we actually learn? By repetition, by repeating it. Like I was doing a workshop one time, and it was sort of a complex figure, but not that hard. But we had quite a number of walkthroughs, and after the session, a gentleman came by and he said, you know, that particular movement is not hard after 10 walkthroughs. As a matter of fact, you can teach anyone or most people just about anything you want to if you repeat it enough times. So actually we learn by repetition. Another thing that we've got to think about before we actually teach is what are we going to use as teaching aids? What do we use? I know that, and I get ideas along this line all the time of new ideas for me as to what to use as teaching aids. And I'm sure that all of you use some type of teaching aid. We must go through this in our own minds as what we're going to do, what we're going to use. I think it would be very advantageous for you to establish a list of guidelines and adhere to these guidelines prior to your actual teaching. There are many subjects that could be incorporated into the list that will be helpful in preparing yourself, and some of the things that come to my mind I will read to you. We would probably all have different lists. Be prepared to evaluate your class as to, and then we're getting back to the individual basis of how they can absorb the things that you teach. Are they good listeners? And the age is perhaps one of the things that you're going to have to contend with. So in other words, be ready. In other words, think in your own mind. Be ready to evaluate your class. Be sure of your material. I think this goes back to the word confidence again. Be sure of your material. Think about the length of tips again. How long am I going to make my tips? In other words, don't get carried away. I think what we mentioned just a moment ago, how much to review. When to start using singing calls. being able to adjust your material to singing calls. Be prepared to give a short background on square dancing. Explain the square dance courtesies. Then the next step would be to actually look at the basic list itself, the list that you're going to use. Study the list. Determine, and I've used the word approximately, what you are going to teach in that particular lesson. Go over the figures within your mind. Decide exactly how you are going to teach each movement. Find out in your own mind where the trouble spots are. Be prepared to handle any difficulties that may arise. Before you actually get to the list itself, I think we should be aware of a number of things that I've written down. The position of hands, hand holds, forearm grasps, hand shakes, height of hands, stars, pull-bys, destination of calls. Where do they end? Where do they begin? Setups, traffic patterns. What are traffic patterns to me? Traffic patterns are such as circulates, when we get down that far, all around, seesaw, to me is a traffic pattern. Grand square would be a traffic pattern. Again, thinking of key words, we've got to think about what are leaders, what are trailers, left, right, forward and back, centers, a quarter, a half, 3/4. What are these? Be sure you have them mentally. Getting to the list itself, and I think this is where each of us would probably differ. Probably there's not two callers in the entire group here would use the same teaching order or use the list the same way. Actually, the basic list was not meant to be a mandatory teaching order, but only to be a guideline for you to follow. One might want to teach one particular movement before or in conjunction with another one because they may complement each other, or you may feel that it should be there. This is perfectly all right, and I see nothing wrong with it as long as you stay within reason on the list. There are many ways, and I'm sure that I would not be able to, and probably Ted or Bob would have different ways to accomplish the same thing. So whatever you do would be... There'd be no problem with it as long as you went through in your own mind and was able to accomplish whatever you set out to do, although it may not be the same way that Bob or that Ted or I would do it. So we've got to think about being prepared mentally for everything that we do. Before we get to the list, there's a couple of other things I would like to say in regard to being able to evaluate yourself, that you've got to think about other things. You've got to think about your leadership. Be a strong leader. Be able to tell people, in other words, to me, this is where leadership comes in, about the deodorant problem, about the bad breath problem, about the do's and don'ts. We've got to take that role. We've got to be a leader in that role. Back to Ted's, and that is attitude, patience, friendliness, again, confidence, courtesies, and one that stands out in my mind, dependability and cooperation. Now, I probably know of no other way than to make an honest appraisal of yourself other than to tape your program, your teaching programs, go back and listen to them. Because I think this is the only way that we can make an honest appraisal of what we do. Because when we're up there working, we don't hear ourselves. And probably the most helpful person would be your wife to actually sit down with you and go through the tapes. And I think this is the best way that you can actually make a true self-evaluation of what you're doing and how you're doing it. Bob, how long are we supposed to be here?
We've got 30 more minutes. 3 o'clock.
Now, getting actually to the basic list itself, I don't do many changes on the list itself. There is one thing that I do early in class, is that I teach my dancers the fraction of the turn as just a practice session. I have them turn a half, or a quarter, a half, and 3/4. And I find that this eliminates probably 90% of the problems that I have in teaching the basic list. Because when you think back of the things that we do, that you either turn a quarter, a half, or 3/4, it will amaze you. So when we get up to where we're teaching swing throughs or whatever it is from there on up, or anything beyond that, then we don't have to go back and say, you're going to turn a quarter or turn a half. They know that. So they have eliminated a good many of my problems. And nearly every other class will go through. And just as a little practice routine, we have them turn a quarter, a half, and 3/4. Yes. Oh, absolutely. Just like I do California twirl, long before I get to it. That we teach them, and then when we get to where we actually need them, there's no problem. For a good many years, I had a problem teaching swing through, spin the top, and things such as that, and this has practically eliminated that particular problem. Yes, sir.
Is this taught as an individual or as a couple?
No, as two people. Two people. Yes. Couple.
Like in a mini wave?
Yes, mini wave. Mm-hmm. Right. Yeah, I haven't done it as an individual. I see a need for that, in particular where we do 180-degree turn individually, such as peel off or turn throughs, and turn throughs seem to be one of the big boogaboos in the list as far as teaching. But that's a very good idea.
Yeah. Can we hold our questions maybe till he completes it and try to write them down? At that time, we'll give you a chance to ask the questions. I think we won't. That way we can keep moving.
As I said, I have not changed the list. There are a couple of things that I do, but I don't think they'd be that important as far as the list itself goes. I think what we have to be able to do is take the list, and if you change it to what will do the best job for you, as long as you stay within reason. I mean, don't get way far out. I don't think it'd be any problem. And the only reason for this is the fact that maybe approximately halfway through your lessons, you may have a party dance or maybe other beginner groups within your area, and you can establish a level as to the level of that particular party. And this would be the only reason for staying fairly close to the actual list itself. In closing, I had the opportunity to attend a lecture one time, and the gentleman's name was Born Seeker, I think was his name. He had a number of points that I thought are extremely valuable, and in particular, our profession. Excuse me. I'd like to read them to you, and then we'll bring it open for discussion. Can't means won't try. Your mind is a place where all progress begins and ends. To every difficulty, there is a solution. To discover a weakness is the beginning of strength. We should all admit our weaknesses. Whatever you focus your attention upon, you give strength to. A fool can condemn, criticize, and complain, and most do. To lose your fighting spirit is to lose it all. Some people make things happen, some wait for things to happen, and then there are those who say, "What happened?" Thank you.
Thank you, John. Some points that I'd like to reiterate here, and then we'll open it up for some questions. As you prepare for your initial teaching segment or class program, I think it's wise that you may list on your own, for your own benefit, your strong points and your weak points. And this sometimes is hard to do, but with the help of your wife or your partner, I think you can do this. List your strong points and list your weak points. If you and your wife happen to agree these are the weak points in my teaching of beginners, that is something I think you should work towards as far as increasing. Also, I think it's valuable to list the steps that you're going to take in your preparation of the class so you won't forget them. Sometimes you'll forget you forgot to take something along with you. It doesn't hurt to take a mental picture and list a few steps. Also, going back, what promotional ideas have you seen or have you heard of that maybe you'd like to incorporate into your class, into the announcement of your class programs? I've been seeing a few different promotional ideas. I'd like to make a list of these things, so you might want to consider that. Also, you may want to consider what special qualifications, like some were listed here a while ago, just list them on the page and see if you qualify in that realm. Like to me, square dance teaching is a curiosity type of thing, too. It's seeing how far you can go with your people, and after you've gone a certain length of time, to see what has been developing, and then kind of evaluate that. Also, you might consider, before teaching, what procedure do you have for the check-in system? Is it a good check-in system? Do the people have to wait? What kind of a bad system do you offer them, badges, etc.? I like to use badges for at least for a while so you can get accustomed to the people's names, so you can call them by the first name. Also, I think it's a valuable tool to list the first 3 nights of your class exactly what you plan to accomplish in those first 3 nights. Whether you ever accomplish them or not, you have established a goal and an objective that you will try to reach for if you have those listed. Also, I think you should consider what do you feel is the major reason for dropouts in your class may be due to your deficiencies. And consider that in talking with your wife and talking with the dancers. If you have some dancers who are just new people, I love to go down and sit down and talk on the sideline with them and ask them, is there something I'm missing, or is there something that you would like me to do more of? Don't be afraid of them. And also, is there a way that you should consider the regulating and controlling methods in disregard to poor dance execution? There has to be different periods of time, and I find about the 7th week of my classes is a down drop in my class. I can't tell you why. I've been trying to figure. Seems like I go along for 6 weeks and everything is perfect, and all of a sudden, downward it goes, and nobody can do anything right. It's just one of those nights. The 7th or 8th week, I always have it. So I've started planning now on the 7th or 8th week to do nothing but easy, simple, relaxed movements that they will enjoy doing, because there's something wrong in me that I'm not getting through to them. Also, what do you offer in mixers? Do you do any rounds in your teaching? I like mixers. I like teaching of rounds, simple rounds, something they can do in 20 minutes of teaching? And lastly, do you have a follow-up system on the dropouts to determine why they have discontinued? I found out in a class, the one I'm referring to was in Long Beach about quite a few years ago. We had quite a large group, and I found out by exercising the privilege that I had to call them individually to find out why they dropped out. And I was very surprised that the majority of the dropouts happens to be for certain specific things, like an operation or the change of jobs. But the biggest thing that I found out was a lot of people, which we don't believe this, really don't like the square dance. Some people are rather bold. Can you imagine that? And that's hard for some of us to believe, but this is true. But the follow-up procedure that I used, I encouraged 3 squares out of, we had at that time 40-some squares in beginner's class. We encouraged 3 squares to come back into the class program. And after they came back, seemed like it was a little bit better because I had taken the time on a personal vein to discuss with them, we want you there, we'd love to have you. Please try it one more time and give me another chance. Don't blame them. Give me the other chance to try and help you with some problems you have. All right, we have about 20 minutes here. We'd like to open this for some questions, all right? If you stand up and please give me your name and the question, and you can go from there, all right?
I'm
Keith Topon from Ogden, Utah, and the question.
All right. I have noticed that you have mentioned several times for you to ask your wife. Now, one of the things I would like to say...
Let me put that on the tape here. Yes. Keith is asking that many times during this session we have asked to consider your wife. And okay.
Okay. Now, I believe that my wife and I get along as well as anyone, but the reason that I get along with her is I don't ask her questions.
You're right, Keith. We agree with that.
I'm as human as anybody. I cannot take criticism. So how can you consider your wife and your wife's opinion when as soon as she starts to criticize, you turn her off? Now, has somebody got an answer?
All right, Ted, go ahead. You have your hand up. You haven't been married as long as Johnny and I have.
That's true. The thing that I found that helps me more than anything else when it comes to considering what my wife has to offer in the way of criticism is that, don't want to use the word divorce the fact that she's my wife, but I guess that's about the best use of words, is that my wife is without a doubt my very best friend. And my very best friend is not ever going to say anything to me that's contrary to what she feels is one of my problems. And so when she says something, I better listen to it because that's coming from a friend telling me how I can better myself. That's just my view. Yeah.
Want to hitchhike on this, John?
I think that really your wife is in the best position of anyone to be able to make a true appraisal of what you're doing. I mean, more so than probably anyone else. And I think that she would
Probably give you an honest opinion, whereas some other people who were not as close as your wife may be hesitant to really tell you exactly what they think. I know my wife is by far my best critic.
I have to hitchhike on the same thing because I feel like that the honest evaluation comes from the heart with my wife. On the other hand, I know that some people, like my dancers, will gloss over this and maybe give you a false impression that everything is going great, but it's really not. Do we have a different question? We'd like to get as many. All right, second question. Jack Peters from Portland, Oregon, and the question.
I understand the weakness of the seminar for this afternoon, but as a new member in CALLERLAB for my first time, I would like to have seen something like this when I first got into Square Dance.
For the tape, let me put something, for the tape, Jack is indicating that he feels it would be good to have this type of a session prior to the starting of an instruction, if I understand you correctly. Good point. Good point. Somebody else went, all right, next over here. Claude Side from Camino, all right? All right.
We've been talking a lot about evaluation of the personal caller and the evaluation of our beginner's class. This isn't a question, this is more my opinion.
Okay, an opinion for the tape.
I would like to say that I feel it's a good new dancers class, and I'm doing a good job if I meet the following criteria. The dancers enjoy themselves every night. Also, the dancers are taught to dance and learn to dance without them feeling and staying in a classroom atmosphere.
All right, that they have a good time each night, number one, and also that the class atmosphere is conducive to making them want to come back. No matter what you do something to make them want to come back. Thank you. Next one. Bill Walker from Seattle.
Johnny mentioned visual aids class. Besides having a square of experienced dancers get up and demonstrate some movement, can you give me some examples of visual aids?
Visual aids. Okay. Johnny, he's asking the question for the benefit of the tape. He's asking to what methods or visual aids do you utilize in your class teaching, right?
Okay, excuse me. Right off the top of my head, I use the chair or some object for the square through. I use the wall behind you as a means of a 180-degree turn. I use the sidewalk in like the wheeling deals. Do you understand what I'm talking about when I talk about the sidewalk? Okay, the sidewalk is the walk running between you and the other couple. And when you finish the wheeling deal, I want both couples to be on the sidewalk facing in the opposite direction with the right-hand couple in front. But you've got to be able to visualize that sidewalk. Now I say point to the sidewalk. They all point to the center. The racetrack on the circulates, I explain it as two different racetracks. Center people are on one. The outside people are on another. Stay on your own racetrack, and there are 4 pit stops. Yours and 3 others. And let me see.
Johnny, if I understand you correctly, these are more mental pictures than actual visual.
Well, yes. I might be, what I think, about the only thing I use as a teaching aid, as far as he's concerned, is probably the wall behind you or the chair. Can't think of anything right offhand.
I'm trying to think, but I can
Well, that'd be good, but they're maybe not always available unless you have one of your own. We're talking about the normal hall, yes.
Do you have any method or magic of teaching a turn?
The question is, do you have a magic, anything magic that you have to teach the proper way of a turn through? Put it on tape. Yes, the question is a good way to teach a turn through. You want to answer this, John?
I don't have any magic way. I'll be the first one to admit that I don't have a magic way, but I have found out, again, I use the wall behind you because that's going to be your final destination, and that you must pull by. You must turn them loose because they have a habit of after the turn through or the turning half, they will step ahead, but they'll still be hanging on, and their arm will be way back here. So you must tell them to be sure and turn loose and step ahead. But I don't have any magic way. I'm open.
Just to add to this, I try to tell my people that the hands, now after you complete the turn through, there's stickiness on the hands. Get rid of them. Get rid of them. But don't do it like this, a smooth pull by as they do it. Ted, you had something to add. We'll get over to you in just a minute.
I don't believe there is a magical way to teach a turn through. But I think it's real important to let people know where they're going to have to end up when they get done. So if you've got two people facing each other, I've found it helpful to have them turn around back to back and say, now that's where I want you when you get done. And another thing that I found that I was very guilty of for a long while, I was doing turn through, Alaman left. Turn through, Alaman left. Almost every time I did a turn through was an Alaman left. Found out that they couldn't do it any other way. So it's real important to check your choreography and do something other than an Alaman left from a turn through, like a swing through, turn through, trade by, or something like that. That's kind of important. But show them where it ends up.
One teaching aid you might consider, which I like to do, is in teaching the swing movement with your new dancers, is to not take my wife out on the floor to do it with first. I'd rather take one of the people who are in the class who have never had this opportunity before. And if I can get them through that swing in the discussion and the instruction method, then the other class feels a little bit more relaxed. Well, if she can do it, I can do it. This happens to me. We had a question over here. Yes, sir. Jack from for the tape, we're talking about turn-throughs. Okay.
So this year I decided a good many singing calls used star left to a turn through, element left. So we went to stars to a turn through, element left a few times. It seemed to work out smooth. Once they've done this for a short space.
I don't follow you, Jack. You say you're doing a star movement? A star? Okay.
You have a head to a man who went to the center with the left-hand star.
Okay.
Your partner do a turn through.
Oh. Okay.
And
Positioning.
while everybody was moving, it seemed to work out pretty well. And then after they had done this for a short space, maybe one evening, and the next night, I gave them from a static just head turn through.
For the tape, he's using star movements and then into a turn-through movement. Can we leave turn-through and not get too long on this? I'd like to move on if we can. Is that all right with everybody? All right, one quick comment. Mark Nichols, Medford, Oregon.
One of the things that I've come across lately has been the pocket rule. I don't know how many of you have ever heard that, but when you get...
Mark is discussing the pocket rule, okay.
Pocket rule. When you get your hand around the pocket on your turn through, on your right and left through, when you get the hand around the pocket, that's as far as it should go. Let it drop there. We call it the pocket rule. It's a key word type of help in your teaching.
I don't understand it, but I'm not trying to be rude. I see. Past your pocket. Okay. All right. Okay. Yes, Will. Will Eads from Escondido.
I have a question for Johnny.
All right. Question.
On the quarter and the half and the three-quarter turns, you say that before you do your swing through or spin us up, whatever, that your dancers know for a quarter, half, and three-quarter. Could you explain how you do that?
Absolutely, sure.
Wait a minute, Johnny. On the tape. Wait a minute, Johnny. The question by Will Eads is that during a quarter, a half, or three-quarter turn, he has this completed before he gets into the spin the tops, et cetera. Johnny's going to demonstrate it, but we can't show this on the tape.
Okay, generally what I do is break it down so they know. I say make a full turn from this position. We make a full turn around, and everyone can make a full turn. Okay. Now, when I'm dancing, and I have to admit, and I have to be honest with you, the hardest turn for me to make is what? Three-quarters. So the next one I say is turn half. So we may turn half. Then I may say turn half again, so that they'll be sure. Now, a quarter is not very hard. They just turn a quarter, so we can turn a quarter. Now, when we get to the half, or three-quarters, it's really hard. It is for me. And the only way that I can figure out, really, three-quarters is to turn a half and a quarter more. Because I can turn a half easily, and I can turn a quarter easily. But I have problem doing the three-quarter turn right flat. So I say in my own mind, I'm going to turn a half and then a quarter more.
That answer, Will? I hope this is on the tape. Yes.
One comment I'd like
Name?
J.L. Hall, Hurricane, Utah.
All right. And the question?
One my fault, and I've got to do something to find out so that to get it through to them.
Thank you. We have about 3 minutes. Let's go back to the back corner. He's had his hand up. Yes. Don's person from Marion, Iowa. Eliminate the dancers? Well, I hope none of you buy it. I hope that those are the people that you take more time with to keep them in the movement. Another question. Harold Freeman from San Jose. That's close.
20 miles.
All right.
His question, the last gentleman asked about where do we eliminate. I always say, when I get to you, where do I stop there? Do I eliminate you when I eliminate those below you? You follow me, Bob?
Yes, I'm trying to get that on the tape-wise. Stipulate it again, Harold. Yes, dancers say they should eliminate. I'm doing this for tape benefit. All right. Start at the bottom of the list. So he's saying, what pretty soon he's going to get to you who've asked the question, therefore do I eliminate you? Thank you, Harold. Yes. Dan Norby from Omaha. Right. The question for the tape is the dancers really do not understand what is being stipulated as far as... Think as a dancer. Think as a dancer. You know, people, we are... All right, one more. One more. You've had your hand up here. George Moore, Cody, Wyoming.
Back to the
Don't leave us yet.
this session, has anybody here had the stupidity or the courage to work up a list of questions to apply to their dancers, to ask their dancers at the end of the session, and have the dancers then identified, evaluate you on a written questionnaire so you come back and see what they're at?
Jory recommends an evaluation by the dancers of you as the instructor, which is very good. I usually don't do it on a written basis. I do it on a verbal basis. Yes. I hate to cut this session short. I wish we had 3 hours. I wish we had 4 hours. Some of these things that you're saying, I think it would be valuable for you to attend the styling session and also be able to give input into the styling session, because this is very important what you're saying. Without any further ado, I want to thank Johnny LeClair and thank Ted Nation for helping me, and thank you for coming and sticking with us.